Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and review here to discuss. In today's video, we're looking at signing from our past couple of days, a slew of injury updates, a couple of other pieces of news, and we've got some trade rumors involving Montreal, New Jersey, Carolina, and the Utah Mammoth. We'll go to all the updates regarding these teams coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And do not forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, another season preview video as per usual. Look at a couple of signings happened from our past couple of days. Only one signing to talk about here, and it was in Tampa. As former 6th round pick in the 2022 draft, the Chicago Blackhawks, whose rights recently expired, Dominic James has signed a 2-year ELC with $920,000 in the Tampa Bay Lightning organization. So it's very interesting pickup here for the Bolts. James was a pretty solid NCAA player over the past couple of years. 2 years ago, he put up 10 goals, 28 points in 35 games. Last year was able to top that, putting up 14 goals and 30 points in 35 NCAA games. So he looks like a pretty decent prospect. I think eventually James, who was a forward prospect, could be a decent like fourth, third line forward for the Bolts. So it's a very small, low-end signing here, but the Bolts have signed Dominic James, who was a former Blackhawks draft pick, to a 2-year ELC, and he's going to come out of college to join the Tampa organization. So very interesting note there. But that's the only signing we saw from our past couple of days. Next, going over to a couple of very interesting pieces of news. So we're going to start the news portion of the video off once again by looking at a couple of injuries. Long list of injuries here, so I'm going to try and do some quick hitters here. Brent Burns will miss a few preseason games due to a minor injury. It doesn't seem like Burns' injury is going to be overly severe. He should be ready for the start of the season, but he will miss a couple of games due to basically precautionary reasons. So very interesting note there. Braden Schneider is clear for contact after recovering from his shoulder injury, so it's great news there. The Rangers could definitely use a solid top four defenseman in their lineup this upcoming season, so to see that Schneider is healthy is very good news there for the Rangers. Taylor Gauthier, who's on an AHL-only deal in Pittsburgh, will be out longer term with the undisclosed injuries, so Gauthier was supposed to provide some depth in the AHL on the goaltending side, and it seems like he'll be out for probably at least a couple of months, so a bad blow there for the Penguins. Simone Benoit has an upper body injury, and Nick Waugh has a lower body injury. They're both out day to day. It doesn't seem like those injuries are either too severe as well, but they are currently out due to injuries, so that's bad blows there for the Maple Leafs at the current point in time. Artemi Panarin avoided a major injury scare in, I think, training camp, but he is going to be out day to day with lower body injuries, so hopefully it's not an overly long-term injury for the Rangers and Panarin, and hopefully he'll be able to come back in the very near future. Angus Booth, a young prospect in Los Angeles, and Corey Perry, new acquisition of Los Angeles, are both scheduled to miss months at this current point in time, with lower body injury for Booth and a knee injury for Perry. We already talked about Perry. He's probably going to miss the next 6 to 8 weeks, maybe a little bit longer, so he's probably not going to be back until November, December at the earliest, so that's a bad blow there. Booth was a decent prospect, probably wasn't going to make the NHL roster this upcoming season, but still, it's not overly great to see Booth, who would have probably had a solid training camp, wind up being out with injuries, so very interesting note there. Kevin Hayes will be out at least the next month for the Pittsburgh Penguins with the upper body injury. He'll be reevaluated in a month. It could be longer than that. So Kevin Hayes, who's a decent middle six guy for the Pittsburgh Penguins, will probably be out until mid to late October at the earliest. So a very interesting update there for Kevin Hayes. Macklin Celebrini missed practice on Friday due to an illness, but it's not supposed to be a lingering illness, and Celebrini should be back in the next day or two for the San Jose Sharks. Zeev Buium sustained upper body injury in practice. He's kept him out over the past couple of days of practice. Not overly great news there. Buium's supposed to be a really solid top six, top four defenseman this upcoming season for Minnesota, but for a time being, he's currently nursing an upper body injury. And Mammoth forward Alex Kerfoot is out week to week with a lower body injury. So with us being only a couple of weeks away now from the start of the season, there is a possibility Kerfoot could miss the first few games of the season with that injury. So very interesting out there. Those are some very interesting injury updates on our past couple of days involving Burns, Schneider, Gauthier, Benoit, Waugh, Panarin, Booth, Perry, Hayes, Celebrini, Buim, and Kerfoot, so very interesting note there. Next, going over to other couple pieces of news. Jack Roslovic apparently, according to some recent reports, declined an offer from the Edmonton Oilers. So apparently the Edmonton Oilers did indeed offer Jack Roslovic, who's one of the top free agents left on the free agent market, a contract, and Roslovic turned it down. So very interesting note there. Roslovic, I'm guessing, probably was only offered like a 1-year cheap deal because the Oilers don't have a whole bunch of cap space, so we'll guess like maybe a $1.5 million deal for 1 year. That's probably why Roslovic turned it down. I think we'll have probably been open to going to Edmonton for a little more money and probably a little more term. Once again, I can't confirm that that's the contract the Oilers offered, but just given their current cap hits and their current situation, that's sort of what I'd be expecting. So even though the Oilers did offer Jack Roslovic, who's still UFA, a contract, Roslovic turned it down, and he's still looking for an opportunity to play at the NHL level. So very interesting note there. According to some recent reports, Ryan Suter, the longtime blue liner who's played his career in Minnesota, in Dallas, recently this past season in St. Louis, is not looking for a contract. So apparently he told his agent to not go and try and find a job opportunity for him elsewhere, not to try and drum up some offers from other teams. He says that if there's a team out there who's willing to take a chance on him, he still might sign. Like, he's not willing to call it quits yet, but it does seem like Ryan Suter is not in any rush or looking for any opportunity to get back into the NHL. So very interesting note there. But Ryan Suter, who is definitely up there in age, I think he's 40 years old now, is not looking for a new contract, and if one does wind up coming his way, and he'll be happy to take it, but he's not actively looking for a contract, so very interesting note there. When it comes to Mason McTavish, David Pagnotta recently mentioned that the Ducks' McTavish's camp are far apart when it comes to a extension. Apparently, according to Pagnotta, McTavish wants a 7 to 8 year deal, like a long-term deal at around an AAV of $7 to $8 million per season to remain with the Anaheim Ducks, which I don't think is overly unreasonable, especially given the fact that Terry got a 7x7 deal a couple of years back. So somewhere similar to that, I think, would be all right. But apparently, according to Pagnotta, the Ducks want him to go 5 years and only want to give him an AAV of like $5.5 million. So they're like 2 to 3 years in term apart, and they're like $1.5 million to $2.5 million apart in AAV. So you can see why there's been no signing of Mason McTavish at this point in time. It seems like they're still very hesitant to try and trade him away because he is such a key piece of that Ducks forward group going forward. But at this current point in time, the gap is still huge between McTavish and the Ducks when it comes to a contract extension. So very interesting note there. But even though McTavish wants to go longer term, the Ducks want more of a lower end 5-year deal, and they still can't come to terms on an extension at this current point in time. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to the Utah Mammoth, according to some recent reports, the Utah Mammoth had internally discussed trying to go after Carter Hart when he was available to be signed. Now, according to some recent reports we saw right after it was announced that the World Junior players, the 5 guys who are in the allegations, who are found not guilty, were going to be able to sign, there was a lot of speculation as to where Carter Hart would sign. I've heard a lot of people say that Utah was a team as a potential landing spot for Carter Hart. According to some recent reports, I think it was Pierre LeBrun. I might be wrong on that. It might have been Chris Johnson or someone else. Utah did have internal discussions about going after Carter Hart potentially. It seems like at this current point in time, they're not going to explore that route, so don't expect Carter Hart to be signing in Utah, but they did apparently have some discussions, at least internally, and potentially going after the former top level goaltender. So very interesting note there. But apparently Utah did have internal discussions trying to see if they would make sense to sign Hart, and according to some recent reports, that's not going to happen. So very interesting note there. But those are all the news updates from the past couple of days, as Hart is probably not going to go sign Utah. McTavish and the Ducks are far apart on a contract extension. Ryan Suter is not looking for a deal in St. Louis. Jack Roslovic declined an offer from Edmonton, and those are all the injury updates. And lastly, here, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So going over to a couple of trade rumors, we've got a couple of things to talk about here. So first, when it comes to the Carolina Hurricanes, according to a couple of recent reports, I think Pagnotta was the one who mentioned this. Might have been a couple of other insiders as well, but I'm pretty sure it was Pagnotta who mentioned this. He says that the Carolina Hurricanes are currently the front runner and the most likely team at this point to sign former 2018 World Junior player who's about to come back into the NHL, Michael McLeod. Now, McLeod was drafted by the Devils, was a really solid guy just before the World Junior stuff came out, and he was suspended from the NHL. He was starting to heat up in New Jersey as a solid second line center because he, and Hughes were suffering with injuries. So McLeod really sort of started to fill the void and was starting to turn it up when it came to the on-ice play for the Devils. Now, of course, he got suspended, hasn't played the NHL level in a year and a half, so he's probably going to be a little bit rusty. But the Canes don't have the greatest of center groups. Like, they have a solid third line center in Stahl and a solid first line center in Aho, but their second line center is lacking. Like, they're trying Logan Stankoven in training camp as a second line center. Kotkaniemi's there, but he's not really a second line center at this point in his career. There's a couple of other guys, but they're not really clear-cut second line centers. So if they were to sign McLeod and he's able to fit in with the Carolina Hurricanes team, maybe he can be that second line center that this Carolina Hurricanes team has been looking for. So once again, there's been no concrete update when it comes to guys like Carter Hart or Dylan Dubé, and there's still been no info on a potential trade of Alex Formenton from Ottawa Senators. But according to some recent reports from Pagnotta and I think a couple of other insiders, the Canes are definitely the front runner and most likely to line Michael McLeod, which could be really big news there for the Hurricanes to try and improve that center group of theirs. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to the Montreal Canadiens, sticking with David Pagnotta, he recently mentioned that Dach's performance in training camp could either speed up or slow down the process for the Montreal Canadiens to be going after a second line center. Now, Dach last year, and I think it was February, wound up suffering an injury that wound up finishing his season for him. So that was a really bad blow there. Dach's been injured so much over the past little while. He hasn't been able to get consistent NHL minutes for a consistent basis. But now he's healthy enough to go for training camp, which is really good news there for the Canadiens. But according to some recent reports from Pagnotta, he says that Dach's performance in training camps are really going to either expedite or hinder the search for a second line center in the Montreal Canadiens organization. Now, basically, the reasoning for Pagnotta mentioning this is if Dach's looking good and he's looking a lot better than he has been in past years, and his injuries don't look like they're catching up to him, Dach can be the temporary second line center. Even if he's not the long-term fit as a second line center position, he could probably start the season as a second line center, and the Canadiens could roll with him at least until the trade deadline when they could potentially go after a major upgrade. But if Dach's still looking shaky, he's not looking overly good, he has to be put in like the bottom six, then that might expedite the Montreal Canadiens' search for a second line center, because this team definitely needs a second line center. They need someone who can really round out that center group. They have a solid 1C in Suzuki, a couple of other guys who can play in like third or fourth line center roles, but they definitely need someone who can fill in that second line center role, and a guy like Dach could definitely still fill it. But if Dach's still looking injured and rusty and he's not looking like he's a solid second line center option, that might hurry up the Montreal Canadiens to potentially make a trade in the coming weeks. So I'll have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Kirby Dach. His performance might be a big indicator as to which way the Canadiens go when it comes to their second line center position. Next, going over to Connor Ingram. Apparently, according to a couple of recent articles I saw, Ingram's time in Utah is coming to an end. In our last video, we talked about how there's a lot of speculation that Utah might move Ingram on waivers in the coming days, weeks leading up to the start of the season. They have Vanacek, they have Vejmelka. Ingram just came out of the NHL Players Assistance Program. It's probably going to need a little bit of time to get back up to speed at the NHL level, but Ingram's still a decent goaltender in my opinion. He can be a decent backup 1B goaltender for a lot of different teams. So I don't know if they would claim him off of waivers. He's got 1 year left at a $1.95 million AAV. Maybe some teams could look at that, but there's no guarantees in my opinion that any team will look at that, especially with his cap hit. But I do wonder if he does clear waivers, does that make him more of a trade candidate? I've seen a couple of recent articles mentioning that Ingram could wind up being dealt. Now, I'm not sure what teams could be interested. I would look at Columbus, I would look at Carolina, maybe to some extent Edmonton, and there's probably a couple of other teams out there who would definitely benefit from adding like at least a solid backup goaltender at the NHL level. Once again, no guarantees that he'll get moved or anything, but I did see a couple of articles mentioning that that's a possibility, especially if he clears waivers for the Utah Mammoth. So we shall wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Ingram as he could be placed on waivers, and after being placed on waivers might still be traded, so we'll have to wait and see on that. And lastly, going over to the New Jersey Devils, there was a report out there, I'm not exactly sure who it was from. It might have been from TSN, it might have been from Sportsnet, I'm not exactly sure, but apparently, according to some recent reports, there were teams out there in the NHL this past offseason who were trying to acquire Jacob Markstrom from the New Jersey Devils. Now, according to some very recent reports, I think it was from Pagnotta and maybe even from Chris Johnston, the Devils and Markstrom are currently discussing a potential contract extension. Markstrom's in the final year of his deal. He's got a $4.13 million cap hit. He's getting up there in age. I think he's like 31 34, 35 now, so any sort of an extension will probably only be like a 2 to 3 year deal to keep him in New Jersey. But apparently there were a couple of other teams out there this past offseason who inquired about the availability of Jacob Markstrom, including the Edmonton Oilers. Markstrom, who used to play for the Calgary Flames, knows the state of Alberta quite well. He knows Western Canada quite well because he started his career in Vancouver. So like he played for Vancouver, played for Calgary. Imagine if he was traded to Edmonton. Like that would have definitely improved the Oilers' goaltending. I'm not sure what the Oilers would have had to give up. My guess would have been like at least a first round pick for Markstrom and probably something else, probably like a goaltender. I would wonder if they would have to give up Skinner or some other solid player on the forward group. Like obviously that didn't happen. There's talks about Markstrom and the New Jersey Devils talking about an extension. So I don't think there's any more possibility of Markstrom getting dealt. I think it's more than likely that he'll get an extension at some point. If not before the season starts, then maybe during the season. But very interesting note there. There were a couple of teams out there. I guess it would be Columbus, Pittsburgh, maybe to some extent Carolina, and apparently confirmed the Edmonton Oilers were definitely checking in on Jacob Markstrom, potentially on the availability of him. But alas, the Devils did wind up keeping Markstrom, and he's going to be with the team going forward, potentially longer than this year. So very interesting note there. But that's all I'm going to talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. What do you think about the Devils? Are you happy that they wind up keeping Markstrom instead of dealing him? Do you think Ingram gets dealt by Utah? Is the Canes the right fit for Michael McLeod? And do you think that Dach can be the short-term second-line center option for the Montreal Canadiens? Definitely my thoughts on all of that, plus all the news updates, the injury updates, and the signings from the past couple of days. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and for to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Do not forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. Also, a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis. If that's going to check that out, if you want to that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.